Well, joining me now is Leon Panetta, who's held a number of posts in democratic administrations, including head of the CIA. Welcome to you.
Good to be with you, Adam.
I want to ask you first of all about this new United States strategic strategy position. What do you make of it?
Well, it's quite a change from what I believe has been the position of the United States going back to World War II and for 80 years. Both Republican and Democratic presidents, although they may have had their political differences, the fact is that most of them stood for the same principles that first and foremost, the United States would be a world leader in the world. Secondly, that we would support strong alliances, particularly NATO and other alliances, to be able to work with our allies and friends in dealing with security threats in the world. Thirdly, that they would stand up to tyrants, and that it was important not to let tyrants have their way if we're to protect the peace. And thirdly, obviously, the importance of maintaining a strong national defense. Uh, I think the strategy released by the White House uh, basically uh, kind of pulls the United States back from the role of world leadership, uh, doesn't mention the importance of taking on China and Russia, North Korea, uh, Iran, terrorism, which are the principal threats to our peace in the world right now, the most prevalent danger points in the world, and then goes after our European allies for not taking stronger steps and for not allowing various political parties to participate in the elections, I just think it really sends a large and confused message about what the United States really stands for.
How seriously do you think we should take it? I mean, we got a preview of these sort of attitudes from JD Vance at the Munich Security Conference, and people kind of brush that aside. Should we take this seriously, or is it just, America first, sounding off?
Well, I think it's more of a political document than something that uh, is there to really guide and strategize our national security defense. And my sense is that this administration pretty much plays foreign policy on a day-to-day basis. One day they'll be America first. The second day they'll be talking about, with European allies. The third day, uh, even though they talk about backing off of military action, they're suddenly threatening military action in Venezuela. And so it's not an administration that has a lot of guideposts. It's basically operating by the seat of their pants, and that means that I'm not sure that this particular strategy paper is going to be any kind of blueprint for where we're going.
It's clearly hostile to the European Union, as you say. Championing, as actually talking about getting four countries to sort of undermine the European Union and supporting political parties that don't do that. I mean, this is an unprecedented level of interference, isn't it?
Well, what I'm concerned about is that I come from a time where it was very important to work with our European allies, uh, and that goes back to World War II. But we have always worked closely with European allies. When I was Secretary of Defense, I spent a lot of time talking to my counterparts in Europe. When I was Director of the Civil Rights, spent a lot of time working with them and sharing information and working together on security issues. And frankly, I think that's where the United States needs to be. The last thing we need to do is to kind of withdraw from the rest of the world and throw rocks at those that are trying to deal with security threats. So uh, I I really do believe that Europe and our allies in Europe are actually standing up for themselves. They are protecting NATO in the mission that NATO should be all about. Uh, they are increasing their contribution to defense, which is important. And more importantly, they're providing the weapons and support that Ukraine needs at a very difficult time. So I think they are actually performing a very important leadership role right now in terms of dealing with the threats in the world.
But I mean, he's not the first president who's talked about changing emphasis away from Europe. We had, of course, the pivot to the Pacific under Barack Obama. Now we've got the so-called Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, talking about dominating the Western Hemisphere. And you've already mentioned Venezuela. And even a plan or talking about in a leaked version of this document of a new G5 comprising America, China, India, Japan, and Russia, which of course is currently menacing Europe. I mean, isn't the sensible thing for the Europeans to conclude that really we're on our own and that our alliance with the United States is over?
Well, I think Europe can read these signals as well as anybody else in terms of the administration talking about America first and kind of withdrawing from its leadership role in the world and identifying more with autocrats in the world than with democracies. So I think it's understandable that Europe would come to the conclusion that they're really going to have to work together, operate on their own, be unified, and take the right positions that are important to national security. Having said that, I think it's important for Europe to also know that there is still, I believe, a great deal of bipartisan support for that very important and traditional alliance that we have had with Europe, and that there are many that still recognize the importance of working with our European allies, uh, mainly because it's critical that the democracies of the world work together in order to confront the autocracies of the world. There's no question right now that autocracies like Russia and China and Iran and North Korea are all working together to try to support each other. This is a critical time when democracies have to come together and to unify and to be strong in opposition to these autocracies, which threaten our basic values when it comes to our freedoms and our rights and our liberties. So
Problem is that
I think it's important for Europe to understand that while the president says what he says and the administration says what it says, that there's still a lot of support in Washington and the country for our European allies.
I mean, a lot of people fear that Trump's America, at least, is inclining towards being an autocracy.
No, I think that's a concern that he always expressed admiration for the autocrats and obviously talks more critically about democratic governments in the world. And that, clearly sends a signal to the autocrats. And I think it's a signal of weakness, very frankly. I think when Trump says that, he basically is undermining the real strength of the United States of America, which is not only to stand with our allies, but to stand for the values and the rights and the freedoms that democracy is all about. That's been part of our strength in the past. Uh, America does not just represent the importance of providing security, it also represents the basic values that we all share, that we believe are important if people are going to have the ability to govern themselves. And that really is something we all treasure.
In practical terms, where does this leave the process for a ceasefire and a settlement in Ukraine? Because we've got meeting of the so-called coalition of the willing, including Britain, France, and Germany next week, seemingly proposing a very different direction from the Russian-inspired one, which the Trump administration is pursuing.
Yeah, I think the most frustrating thing that I've seen in these last number of months is the failure of Trump to stand up to Putin. Uh, I know Putin. I've worked with intelligence on Putin. Putin is not to be trusted. Putin is a tyrant. Putin's goal, frankly, is to undermine the United States of America and democracies like the United States. And there's no question in my mind that if we're going to deal with Putin, we have to deal with Putin from a position of strength and make clear to Putin that he is not going to succeed in invading a sovereign democracy. He's not going to be rewarded for having tried to destroy an important sovereign democracy. And so my view is Trump needs to stand up to Putin now, which means we have to provide the weapon systems that Ukraine needs, and we have to implement the sanctions and the economic sanctions that will send Russia a signal that the United States is going to stand strong against Russia and prevent Putin from being successful in Ukraine. That's the message the United States should be sending. I appreciate the fact that the European countries and our allies in NATO are unified in sending that exact message to Putin.
Is the right thing to do in bearing in mind what you said about the rule of law, is the right thing to do for the Europeans to access the Russian assets, some $200 billion of Russian assets, and to effectively give them to the Ukrainian government?
I believe it is. I believe it is. I think Russia invaded Ukraine, deliberately invaded Ukraine. Uh, they continue to attack Ukraine and kill innocent men, women, and children. Uh, they've they've destroyed a lot of that country. Uh, Ukraine has had the courage to stand up to Russia, to fight back. They certainly have earned the right to be at the conference table, at the negotiating table, and have earned the right to basically determine what should or should not be part of a peace proposal. Um, and so I really think that it's critical for Europe to try to do what it can to provide funding to Ukraine in order for them, assuming that we can reach some kind of negotiated settlement. Ultimately, Ukraine has to rebuild itself and repair the damage from a war that was started by Putin and continues today by Putin.
Is it, though, fair to say that Europe is too weak to do this on its own, partly because it has ridden for too long on America's defense umbrella?
Well, I think that it is important for Europe to be able to stand on its own right now in particular. Look, I would prefer to have the United States be a good partner with Europe and work together with our European allies with regards to NATO and making sure that NATO fulfills its objective. I think NATO has been critical. NATO was started by Harry Truman. It was started as a way to try to stop the Soviet Union from overwhelming Europe, and it has proven very successful as an alliance. I think the United States is an important partner, and yes, we bring a lot to the table. But in the present administration, which provides a lot of mixed messages as to just exactly what it is or is not going to stand for, I think Europe has to basically stand up on its own, develop a strong defense for each of those countries in Europe. They're going to have to invest in weaponry. They're going to have to invest in better security. Uh, that's not bad. That's not bad. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I used to send that message to Europe when I was in office that it was important for Europe to step up and make sure that it is doing what it can to build up its own defenses. That's happening now. That's important. I hope that Europe continues to do that because, frankly, right now, Europe is critical to our ability to say to Putin that Putin is not going to be able to invade other countries in Europe. He's going to be stopped.
Turning to what some people sometimes call America's backyard, the Western Hemisphere, what do you make of the administration's actions towards Venezuela?
Well, look, my view is that what the United States ought to be doing in dealing with a number of threats in the world is to build strong alliances. That's why I believe NATO is important. I think the United States has to build alliances in dealing with China, with Great Britain, with Australia, with South Korea, with Japan, with the countries in the ASEAN world. I think it's important to have strong alliance in dealing with the Middle East, with moderate Arab countries, working with Israel to stand up to Iran and stand up to terrorism. And when it comes to the Western Hemisphere, very frankly, the United States ought to be building allies. We ought not to be down there like a lone cowboy, deploying our forces down there, operating against Venezuela and operating against drug trafficking, which is a real problem. But the only way you're going to confront those issues is to work with other allies, to work with other countries, to show that this is not about the United States kind of being the bully in the Western Hemisphere, but rather the partner that we need to be in terms of being able to develop both security and economically develop a relationship with those important countries in that part of the world.
But wouldn't overthrowing President Maduro be a good thing?
Oh, look, there's no question that it's always nice when a tyrant is removed from office, and that's true for Maduro. But, the question is going to be, how do you get that done? And does it require a war? We've now deployed 25% of our Navy, along with a carrier strike group, thousands of Marines. There's almost 15,000 people that have been deployed to that area. But frankly, the objective has not been clear by the United States. I don't know what the objective is right now, and he hasn't been clear. You would think it would be about regime change and getting rid of Maduro, but he really hasn't made that clear. Is it about drug trafficking? Is it about oil? Is it about trying to reduce the influence of China and Russia in this hemisphere? What exactly is the objective? Because if it's about regime change, and I think, frankly, if Maduro is still there after we've gone through all of this, then clearly the United States has failed in this mission. But the issue is, how do you do that? If you go to war, if you send troops into Venezuela, if you bring down Maduro, then we are, whether you like it or not, we are into nation building again. And that can produce a lot of very mixed results, as we've seen throughout history. So I don't know what the long-range plan is here. And neither do the people of the United States, and frankly, neither does the Congress.
It's a fairly gloomy picture you painted.
It is.
What gives you cause for optimism, if anything?
Look, what gives me optimism for the future is the fact that this country's been through crisis throughout 250 years. We've had a civil war, we've had world wars, we've had recessions, we've had depressions, we've had natural disasters. And somehow we've always found the leadership to get through it. And I think we will again. Why? Because the real strength of the United States is not in Washington. Washington is dysfunctional right now. The real strength of the United States is in communities throughout our country where People do care about what's happening in their community. They're working together. It's not about Republican versus Democrat. It's about people working together to try to provide for their communities and for their states. So that's where the real strength is. It's in the American people, in their spirit, in their resilience, in their common sense, and frankly, in their power to vote. Because that is the ultimate check in a democracy. And I have a great deal of faith in their ability to vote properly for the leadership we need in the future.
Leon Panetta, thank you very much indeed.
Good to be with you.